Thank you, Kathy. Well, happy um, happy Thursday. Happy third Thursday for our ISM Carolinas, Virginia monthly webinar series. My name is Dupre Jones. I'm the current Vice President for the ISM chapter for the Carolinas and Virginia, covering North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. I am proud to welcome a former acquaintance, now friend. We've known each other for about 12 years, I think now, and it's a fun story. Maybe over a sarsaparilla we can share with you the full story there. But we had the honor of meeting at the ISM World Conference in Dallas. I showed up there and I talked to both Heather and another now friend. Said, "Hold on, that's you in person. Wait, that's you in person." And the laughter and the fun just got more and more got louder and louder, maybe you would say. And Heather's just been a dear friend and a fantastic advocate for ISM, and we're just so happy to have her here. As you can see, she's the toner queen with her tiara and crown blazer. I asked her to please wear that for us. So this is then probably our first webinar in 2026. We will have then on the third Thursday and starting back in April, and the continuation of our series. Please, if you have not signed up, in March we will have our regional conference at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, their alumni house. We're talking about the whole topic of money. We in procurement are constantly having to think about money, a lot of times on just cost savings, but we really have an opportunity to be revenue generators and profit centers for our companies as well. And so we're going to be able to talk about a lot of different tools and programs and techniques that we can be both champions of cost savings as well as cost improvement, revenue recovery, that kind of thing. So if you haven't yet signed up, go on ismworld.org and sign up. Without further ado, I'm going to then thank you, Kathy, for posting the link there. I want to welcome, like I said, my dear friend Heather. And Heather, if you would be so kind as just to share a little bit about yourself and how you ended up hanging out with such the cool kids here with ISM.
Absolutely. Well, first up, I just want to thank Kathy and Dupree for the opportunity to join this web series. I've been obviously a huge fan of ISM as a whole for a number of years, and it's just been a really fun org to get involved with, from sponsorship opportunities at the different ISM worlds to connecting with people regionally as well, Carolina, Virginia, and we've got our Western Washington region, so I've made a lot of new connections through here as well since I'm on the West Coast, and just a lot of really awesome people who are just passionate about supply chain and improvement and streamlining processes, all of those things. And it's the number of awesome conversations I've had over the years with different people has just been an amazing opportunity. So very, very thankful to be invited here and back and everything. So I will give you a little digest of me. I've been in the printer imaging space for almost 25 years. So I've seen a lot of different trends and changes over the years.
Child labor, right?
Oh yeah, child labor. Yeah, basically, yeah. Because I was like 2 when I got into this business. So, so seen a lot of different things over the years with what the different printing needs are with different organizations. Private, public sector. We've done a lot of FedGov work too as well. So there's been some different things happening that have kind of changed our landscape. I think in positive ways. So it's just been a really neat journey for me. I've met some amazing people over the years and I can't imagine my life really being any different at where I am now. So I'm very, very thankful and blessed and grateful.
So give us I'm excited that you're so passionate about what you're doing and what you're accomplishing. It's just refreshing. Can you help us understand when we think about imaging and toner? Sometimes we just think about I got to go get another one for my laser jet, or that multifunctional device, that copier is not working at work. Um, Based on what we've talked about, that's not even the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, not really. Sometimes when I'm working with a company, what I've noticed is some of those functions are kind of siloed. So you might have like IT or maybe facilities getting involved with hardware selection, and 9 times out of 10, that means who's left holding the bag of having to, source the supplies is procurement or purchasing. And in that aspect, it kind of becomes a reactionary task. It's someone else picked the hardware, and now I have to try and find supplies. So a lot of times, and these could be companies that are small, mid-size, and I've worked with Fortune 500s that are billions and billions in revenue every year, and yet they're still kind of operating from kind of this siloed sort of mentality. And when you start working in that way, you start losing visibility and losing opportunity to kind of make a positive change to going from that reactive state to a more strategic, like how can I plan this better? So even now I'm working with a client right now who is forward thinking about their next hardware refresh that's going to happen in the next year or two, when they're like, one of the questions they asked me was, what manufacturer is producing a device that we can use where it's not going to get discontinued in the next 5 years? And I'm like, well, no one does that. Like if you're talking about like Lexmark, HP, they all start discontinuing units probably within a year and a half. After 18 months, they start culling and going to the next, the next latest and greatest thing they're making. And so you're constantly, oh, now I've got to have a new supply. And you got to look, is that the right supply for our needs? Are we blowing through cartridges really fast because maybe it's wasn't really right sized for what the user is doing? And so what they're trying to do is um, not necessarily standardize the hardware. They're trying to standardize the supplies. So by kind of flipping the script a little bit and going, okay, well, what machines are still using the supplies that we're already using? So we're actually looking at Brother
Mhm.
multifunction for them as a more suitable alternative to them, because Brother will they don't want to keep making new cartridges and all of that retooling. That's all very expensive. So they'll build equipment that use the same engine, and they'll plop a new model number on it, but it uses the same supply. So they kind of actually aggregate their own supplies. They're like, we want to only be making 100 different SKUs, and we want to only really focus on those SKUs. So we'll just build a new machine because it might need new features, it might be faster, whatever. But they consolidate their own component buying power, their own procurement of the components that build their supplies. And so that, like, for example, they've got machines out there that are 20 years old, or the supplies actually are like 20-year-old models of cartridges and drums, but the hardware is still using the same stuff. So I'm like, so let's not focus on trying to find a machine that won't be, discontinued in a year and a half. Let's look at supplies that where you guys can still use the same supply. So now you're not adding to your catalog. IT maybe isn't having to download new software and all that kind of stuff, because all of the consumables that are being used are the same. So they can now kind of leverage their own buying power on the supply side, because now everyone's using the same supplies. Even 5 years down the road, they can still buy another piece of machine and plop it in with their refresh, and it's still using the same supplies. So for them, it's kind of like getting rid of stuff out of their catalog that's actually kind of becoming more obsolete. And it focuses that buying power, into, the longevity. So for the next 5 or 10 years, we're always going to use these supplies. We don't care what the printer model is. It's let's focus on the thing that we're rebuying all of the time, which is the
Mhm.
consumable. Um, so
Well,
it's
help
kind
me
of been an
understand.
interesting experience.
Also, something I want to touch on that we talked on, and it was something that we all lived through COVID, and there were essential businesses, and those essential businesses were grocery stores and pharmacies, and
Absolutely.
they needed printers as well.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Help
Yeah.
us, like,
Healthcare
maybe help us
was hit pretty
understand
hard.
then this is one way to specifically in the retail industry, where then the types of things that you do that you're helping companies do became so essential from that within the pandemic years, the official pandemic years.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, a client that's in the healthcare space, and they were doing their hardware refresh, every 2.5 years they were, cycling through. They were using HP, and then COVID hit, and obviously everyone remembers what that was like. Semiconductor chips were, stagnant, like no one was shipping anything. And they had just I purchased, I think, like 500 units of this particular HP model. Well, then there was no toner for it. So they could deploy these machines, but HP wasn't producing the cartridges fast enough because they didn't have chips for the toner, which was kind of a problem. So, and because of that too, supply and demand, right? You guys know this very well. When supplies are scarce, what happens to the cost of those supplies? They went up. So we'd done an estimate on what it was going to cost to supply that new fleet over the next year during the COVID year, and it was going to cost them almost $1 million more than they had thought just in toner. It wasn't even talking about the hardware. That was just supplying, their 800 office locations with toner for this thing. So what we ended up doing was sticking with some of their legacy models they had. So we have distribution rights for factory certified refurbished units. So instead of them deploying the new models, we ended up selling them for about 18 months. We ended up selling them the models they'd already been using in the past, which actually helped IT out a lot because they didn't have to download any new software to their servers. So just basically like a plug and play thing. So by kind of extending the life of the models they'd already been using, which the toner for those machines, because they were older units, the toner for those pieces were much more cost effective, like fractions of pennies in comparison with the new HP models they had. So it extended the life of using those cartridges. So we ended up saving them it was like $980,000 over that 18-month period. So then by the time, COVID, things had kind of relaxed a little bit, then they went ahead and started deploying the newer units again. But by then the cost of the supplies had come way down. There was a sustainable reman available for it too, which then just, lowered their cost per page, you know, tenfold. It was kind of a night and day thing when they actually ran the numbers of what, a COVID experience was going to cost them. It was much more than they had thought of. And that part of that issue was because IT and procurement weren't talking to each other. So IT just took the lead, with the hardware, any IT hardware thing. And they were the ones who were always, making the decisions. And procurement
Wow.
just sort of had to play catch up all the time. Which, when you're dealing with low budgets, that's really hard to do.
You know what though? You said something before, and I'm thinking back to one of my favorite quarterly state of risk sessions that ISM had done on a quarterly basis,
Mhm.
and that was on semiconductors. Are is that the chip that's on the like? Help us understand. Is that part of are there semiconductors actually on the cartridges?
Yeah, yeah, there's a little chip. And basically for most manufacturers, it's just a handshake, like, hi, a cartridge is
Mm.
installed. I've got the latest,
Ah,
depending on the manufacturer, HP or Lexmark, for example, I've got the latest firmware, for the machine itself. Um, and this is a Lexmark printer, and yes, this is a Lexmark cartridge, basically. So that's essentially what those chips do. They can also communicate how much toner is left in the cartridge. So when you've got your printer saying toner low, it's the chip that's doing that.
oh,
Not all manufacturers use chipsets. Even during COVID, actually, I think it was Konica and Brother, and I think for some of the Canon equipment that they had out there too, they actually just removed the chips because they couldn't. It was either we can't produce supplies because our equipment needs the chip, or we send out a firmware update just disabling that function in the hardware itself, and then we don't put chips in the supplies. So it's kind of how a few manufacturers got around it. And actually it was a little bit more beneficial because then you're not having there are a lot of customers that will say, "Oh, well, I've tried a remanufactured or compatible cartridge and my printer won't accept it." Like that, that's really the original manufacturer's tactic at trying to control They want to be the only source of supplies. But thankfully, because of the Magnuson-Moss Act of America, you have the right to choose, where you get your supplies from. So with that said, like when there were issues in supply chain with just the supplies for those pieces of hardware, those manufacturers realized, hey, we're gonna really be up a creek if we don't just get rid of this mindset for right now. So for a couple of years, like those three manufacturers just didn't put chips in their supplies because like, well, we may need to remanufacture our own supplies through a collection program because we can't produce enough of them fast enough. And I think even Konica had a one of their main factories for their toner like totally burnt to the ground in the UK. And this was like in 21 or 22 or something. So then they were hit super hard with it. So you kind of see like the manufacturers who are really trying to control, like the micromanage every little thing down to, the supply, where people are getting their supplies. And then you have manufacturers who look kind of more like, hey, if we do this, we're not going to make our customers mad. We'll be able to still supply them, which is productivity, right? If you can't get supplies, then you have this hardware that's basically a, doorstop that doesn't do anything for you. So they kind of looked at it as like, hey, we'd rather not have control over where people are getting their supplies from and make sure our customers actually can function, versus, oh, we don't really care if your machine doesn't work. We still just want you to buy our supply. We don't care if you're
So
down.
it's consumer, they changed their focus more towards
Yeah.
the consumer versus money
Yep,
in a sense.
exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And if you look at like the quarterly reports or, the annual reports of the financials, you can see which ones kind of did better during the COVID years and which ones struggled. And it was because they were just trying to, micromanage and control every little aspect of everything. Which,
Wow.
at the end of the day, you're trying, everyone's goal, I don't care if you're in procurement, I actually make a joke. I say like, if you're in IT or procurement or facilities, you're kind of in sales in a way because you have internal stakeholders who are your customers, right? Too. So we all have customers that we try and help and do the best with and advise the best that we can, all of those things. So when you have companies that are so more focused on the dollar than taking care of their customer, you can see kind of
It
how
affects a
greedy they end
brand.
up getting. Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you can see how many times HP's been sued because of their firmware tactics and all that stuff. I mean, it's an annual thing, and they just go, well, we're making so much money, we don't care if we get sued for a little while, or we'll change our tactic, and we'll kind of what they're doing right now actually is they used to control this on the supply side with through their firmware updates, and now they've been sued so many times because of that. They now just outright say, oh, here's an E series printer, and so if you buy that E series printer you can only use HP cartridges. If you buy one of the other ones, like the D, anything that doesn't
The
have an E in the
premium
name of
ones,
it,
yeah.
then you can use whatever you want. But they don't tell people really. You have to really dig down and understand what that E series printer is. So I've had customers who are like, yeah, hey, your cartridges worked before. I got this off of Amazon and it's always worked and now it's not for some reason. I'm like, well, what's the model of your machine? And they go, oh, it's a blah, blah, blah with an E at the end. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm sorry. You didn't read the fine print. That was 10x too small for you to notice, but you're stuck now buying original OEM for the life of that printer. And then they're mad because they thought they were making a good hardware selection and they weren't paying attention to that one little thing and they didn't realize, okay, now for the next 5 years, I've got to buy super expensive stuff.
So
Uh,
I'm gonna park a topic. You just kind of tried to segue into another topic that I know we really want to get into,
yeah.
but I'm gonna park that just for a few minutes because I know you've got so many stories in supplier due diligence and regulatory and all that fun stuff. But let's park that for a second. So we're gonna hold you back a little bit. But another question is, because we've now gone so digital and paperless, what industry, what kinds of shifts have there been by industry in terms of
Um,
still needing printing, still having to go with actual printed versus being able to go digital?
yeah.
What have you seen?
I can't even really say it's industry specific because I've got customers who are in like retail automotive and they're adopting a more digital environment for their stores. And so they don't print as much where you would think like, oh, I'm going to go get like a tune up and an oil change and, rotate, tire, all of those things. They don't really print much anymore. You used to be able to leave and say, oh, here's the checklist of things they did, sent at the bottom. Now it's all done. Like I just had my car service and it was all done. They just sent me a text. Oh, your service advisor is this. Do you want, your wipers changed or whatever? And it was all on my phone. I didn't have it. Nobody even came up to me and asked me physically. It was just all digital, which is a really for the automotive industry. That's kind of cool considering they still use dot matrix printers for their contracts. But I've got customers that are in, like I said, healthcare, dental space. I've got some that are in retail, so they've got physical brick and mortar footprint stores. And I would say healthcare for sure, healthcare pharmacy because they still had to print physical prescriptions and fit people like to have physical, doctors are looking over charts and there's still an aspect of people printing things.
Mhm.
I have a customer right now who's on the retail side and their business model is pretty unique in where they don't have a lot of DCs where they store all of their product that they sell to consumers. They use their retail stores as like mini DC. So like let's say you're in Sacramento and you buy a pair of glasses, eyeglasses or a belt or whatever the thing is. Instead of it shipping from a DC that might be like in DFW area or something like that, or Atlanta,
Mhm.
and them shipping it
Mhm.
across the country, they'll go, what store is closest to that person that bought that thing? And they'll ship it from the store. So they're kind of reducing CO2 by that way because they're shipping
For
it from the
sure.
closest point. But also they don't have to have like, you know, millions of square footage of warehouse space. So they're just utilizing the space they were already occupying and using their
Mhm.
stores, kind of as mini DCs. And they've been doing this for 30 years. Like it works for them. But so what are they printing? They're printing packing slips and they're printing, using their Zebra printer for the UPS label. So they're kind of print heavy on that side, but do they print like flyers for promotion? They don't do any of that kind of stuff. It's all geared towards like their own drop shipping system that they do.
So, do you have
Um,
clients outside of the U.S. and do they have a different habits? Do they have different practices than in the U.S. when we talk about
I've
that?
got customers that are in Canada, and I would say it's kind of the same thing. It
Mm.
can be industry specific, it can just be business specific. I mean, I have other retail customers who are much more um, digital and paperless than this particular one is. So it's
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
hard to say that like, oh, everyone who's in manufacturing or anyone who's in
Right.
transportation logistics or something is they're all that because they're not. It just depends on how the company runs. And for this one, it's been working for them for 30 years and they pretty much grow through acquisition. So they're just buying up brands here and
Mhm.
there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they adopt the same thing across all of it because it just works for them and because it's super cheap. They stick with machines that are, if it dies in 2 years, they don't care. They're not spending money on IT and service and maintenance and
Right.
stuff because the level of equipment they get are kind of, we're kind of in that use and throw away society anyways right now. But for them, this is the one company I was talking about looking at Brother is well now they can go ahead and plan your next 10 years of hardware refreshes as long as you stick with the same supplies like who cares what the model is? And that's all they really want is they want to stick with the same supplies that are 20 years old because the cost per page is super, super low. So they can get a cartridge that prints 10,000 pages for 30 or 40 bucks a piece. And it's like ridiculous, in comparison with
Wow.
other brands.
So now I'm gonna. Now we'll come back. Now we'll
Okay.
let the horse out of the gate, and we're gonna start racing.
Yeah.
Like you talked about sustainability and the regulatory environment. You and I talked privately before, or have talked earlier about sustainability, but then also now responsible sourcing. And again, I don't really think of print and imaging from a responsible sourcing perspective. Heck, I didn't even, it just dawned on me that you said that there are semiconductors on that, like a chip on the cartridge, and that's that shiny, glittery thing that we see on there. What are you seeing in terms of like why should we care about responsible sourcing in your world?
It's just like any IT product, which printer hardware is in that category. There, what is one of the biggest industries that where you see human trafficking and forced human labor and all that kind of stuff? You see it in IT hardware. Well, 'cause all of
Wow.
that hardware, where is it built? It's not built here, it's built overseas. And so when I talk about responsible sourcing, it's not just being like eco-friendly. That's the easy thing, right? Reusing is better than recycling, all of those things to help the environment. But when you talk about responsible sourcing, I look at it more from a who's building that for you. And so if you are a company who doesn't know where your product is coming from, right? I mean, there's so many different categories where they will because maybe they're consumer front facing and they don't want to be in the news for you being caught using something that was produced by child labor or something. But even companies who aren't like forward facing like that, is who's building it? Where is it being built? Are they using components that aren't going to harm my health? So like there's a manufacturer that's in China, and a lot of printers and printer supplies are produced in Asia. And shipped everywhere globally. But there are a couple of manufacturers in China who just they don't care about IP. They'll legitimately just exactly copy whatever you made. So there's, a lot of the OEMs are suing a lot of those companies because they're outright just stealing their IP and producing a product and even putting it on Amazon and Amazon Business, and the logos look almost identical to the OEMs. So they're
Wow.
tricking people into thinking they're buying, a genuine OEM, and they're not. But because at the end of the day, the cartridge isn't going to stay in their country. They know it's being shipped somewhere else and its end of life is going to be somewhere else. They don't care that they're using, carcinogens in the plastics and in the toner or the ink. And those kind of cartridges, this word has been around for a long time, but it kind of is become more defined in the last few years. A remanufactured cartridge versus a compatible cartridge. So the word compatible now is kind of more associated with an illegally cloned cartridge. Basically, like someone just created a duplicate of the
Just the
OEM.
minimum standard. The
Yeah, yeah.
minimum standard that it'll work. Okay.
Yep. And they don't care where, what's going to happen at the end of the life of the cartridge. So there's probably, I think the stat is like 350 million empty toner cartridges end up in our landfills every year. And it's not to say that those things like, oh, well, let's just get a recycling program. That's great. Well, if you have someone who has like a cartridge collection program for recycling, if they get those cloned cartridges in, which because they're being sold all over Amazon, it's impossible not to get that mix in the cartridge collection process. They can't even break it down. They can't touch it. So usually what will happen is a cartridge collector will take in all these empties and they'll sort them out by manufacturer. They'll take a look and see, is this a clone? Is this a used OEM cartridge? And if it's a cloned cartridge, they can't even like unscrew it and take it apart and put the plastics over here and the metals over here. They literally have to just toss it in the trash because the other part of the reclamation process in remanufacturing a cartridge is if the cartridge is a viable one, then it'll go through the remanufacturing process. Like the old stuff will get stripped out, it'll get cleaned, new stuff will get put back into it, refilled with toner, new chip, and then testing, and then it goes off and off to packaging. Cartridges that kind of don't meet those levels of scrutiny, they'll go, okay, well, this thing just needs to get broken down. So they'll take it all apart, and those plastics will get ground down, and they'll get made into other things. The plastics that get ground down will go to another company who then uses molds, and they'll make bottles or sleeves for our laptops or whatever with that product. Well, those cloned cartridges, you can't break them down like that because you'll start releasing all that toxic stuff back into the environment. So the cartridges
And
just end up
yourself,
sitting.
you could
Yeah.
inhale
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Yeah. Because the cartridge, printers have a part inside them called a fuser assembly. It's basically like the oven for the printer. It's how the toner gets fused to the paper and
Mm.
the print cycle. Well, that thing heats up to over 200 degrees. And some of those components in those cloned cartridges when they get hot, what happens? They kind of become airborne. So then you could be saving, oh, I got this off of Amazon. I got 5 cartridges for $100. This is a great deal, all these things, right? And then you're not realizing that you're actually like poisoning your staff
Well,
by
and
using
yourself,
those, or yourself by using those supplies.
especially
So
let's say it's like a home, like a home computer. You're working
yeah,
remotely, or you have one at home and you buy one of those. You could
yeah.
be infecting yourself or your family.
Absolutely. And you're breathing all that kind of stuff in. So it's part of it's like I kind of look at that part as like that's the eco side of it. Like let's not use stuff that's going to poison anybody. Let's, that should be, top of the priority list. Obviously, like the recycle, reuse, all that stuff is great, slogans and all that kind of stuff. And it does very much help the environment. Um, but the other responsible part of sourcing is, is there any human trafficking or forced labor or child exploitation involved in this product? And a lot of people don't think of ink and toner as being a part of that, but because it's IT related product, it's huge. I mean, there's a big manufacturer in China was added to the UFLPA list back in 2022, and they've been fighting for 3 years, almost 4 years in court, trying to get their list off. And the sad thing is what they did, they have a lot of affiliates that sell their product through Amazon and Costco, all the brand, any kind of web
Shein,
commerce.
all of
It's
them.
everywhere. And so, and I feel bad for Amazon saying this, but like it's like whack-a-mole of them trying to get, counterfeit product off their platform. And so they're constantly monitoring. It's an uphill battle for them. I don't really know how they do it because there's just so many people listing stuff. So what the affiliates of that one Chinese manufacturer did was they just closed up their shop. They rebranded the packaging of the product, and it's the same product. And then they relisted new stores. So yeah, is there this ban in place? Yeah, but it's still everywhere on the internet. I mean, you can actually just go into Amazon and Google the original manufacturer, and you'll see where it says the cartridge with who produced it. And so you're like, okay, well, wait, there's a ban. How did it get on here? And it might take, people flagging that listing, for Amazon to take a look at it, or one of the OEMs going, hey, this shouldn't be here. And then they'll do their official, Amazon scrutinized, reporting, and they'll pull stuff off. But it takes months and sometimes years for that
So
to happen. So.
what type of cartridges are we talking about? Really, just the home ones, or are we talking like multifunctional device, the
Oh
big
yeah,
honkers?
office. Yeah, big stuff for offices, and it's across all manufacturers. It's not just like HP or Lexmark or Epson or Brother. It's everybody.
So
So
with procurement, as a procurement practitioner, how do we even know where to look? How would I even know how to do the due diligence
to
if
find out where your
if
product is coming
XYZ
from,
company XYZ is now becoming ABC or PDQ or
yeah,
whatever? Like
you,
how would we be able to do that? Because during COVID, we kept talking about your sub suppliers, your nth degree supplier,
yep,
because we didn't know. I remember PTSD from this. The country of Malaysia shut down for an entire month. And we couldn't get IT hardware out of there that we
yep,
needed essentially to make what we were doing. How would
yep,
we know how to even go about this? Because I don't know if it's personally, I don't source the print and so forth, so
yeah.
I'm learning a lot from you right now. But how would we know? Like, how would we even know how to do this? How would we know that it's a whack-a-mole game or not? Other
Yeah,
than
if
talking
you're
to you, I
using
mean,
like,
we'd set up an appointment with you, of course. But
yeah, yeah, of course. Happy to help anytime. Um, it's really asking a simple question is who is manufacturing this? So like let's say you're a company who is using a GPO, for example, right? To make it easy because you don't have the staff to source every single subcategory. So you use a GPO. Maybe they've got contracts with Amazon Business or with Staples or whatever. Who is manufacturing whatever that X product is? So you just ask. And if they won't disclose who is actually manufacturing the product, that's like a red flag number one. You should be able to find out who's manufacturing because it's not in like, oh, I'm going to go to them directly and undercut you. I need to know. I need to verify for myself that we are not using products that are toxic or using products that are tied to all the other insidious things like human trafficking and stuff like that. So if they won't disclose who the manufacturer of the cartridges are, I wouldn't touch them. if they, and then at that point too, and it's the FedGov kind of does this already. If you were on, have a GSA schedule for any kind of product, but office supplies for sure. One of the things that we all have to disclose as resellers is what's the country of origin. So if they're telling you the country, if they'll only say, oh, I won't tell you the manufacturer, but I'll tell you where it was originated from, and if it's from China, I mean, not to knock China, but this is where a lot of the trafficking stuff
If
and Malaysia kind of centers. So
mm,
that kind of gives you an insight. Oh, well, I might need to look at this particular category if 90% of the stuff we're getting originated from China. Just to do your own due diligence to find out. But I would say the number one question is just who is the manufacturer? Because a lot of times you're seeing all these supplies on these different platforms and they're branded something else, right? Like the company is maybe just a distributor, and so they brand it as XYZ cartridge or Easy Print or whatever they're calling themselves.
right, right, right.
But they're probably not the manufacturer of the product. They're just repackaging it. So if your company is using stuff like that, then it's like, okay, well, who produced this for you?
So it sounds like
And
we need
asking
to
those
make sure that
questions.
we're being rigorous in the questions we include in our sourcing events and
A little
RFPs.
bit, and the office supplies in general is kind of like not the sexy category. It's a very reactive kind of
We
a
tend to do it
category.
on a catalog basis, on a big lot basis, right? Here are all the different types of things we need.
Yeah.
It tends to get, sometimes I've seen those RFPs going that way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So just, asking a couple of questions and you can really get some insight into that stuff. Like even if like let's say you've got a Staples corporate account or something and you want to use they've rebranded their remanufactured cartridge line a couple times. It used to be like Staples Red and now it's like sustainable. And so there's a couple different things that they've called themselves, but they all use the same couple manufacturers. When you look at their product on their website, it'll say who produced it. So right off the bat, there are companies out there that will disclose to you right away. You don't even have to ask. You can just look at the product itself. But if you don't know, it's like we don't know what we don't know. So it's what's the first, if you want to know where something came from, you got to ask, right?
Sure,
Otherwise,
sure.
it's ambiguous.
Well, man, I know you and I could talk a mile a minute. I think we may want to allow other people to talk. So, folks, if you have some questions or wanted to ask for more, like, want to ask some questions, please put them in the chat so that we can respond. Um, I wanted to then also ask, I guess, where do you see, what's what are what kind of indicators are you seeing on the future of your industry?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, if you look like year over year, the printing supply industry has had reduced revenue, by percentages here and there, and that is just because of the digital space, things, AI being brought in, all of that kind of stuff has definitely changed that landscape. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So it's kind of like what is for your particular organization, what is it, what is your function, what is it that you guys are doing? Are you printing something for marketing, are you doing something that's consumer or client focused? Are there ways that you can kind of streamline things? I mean, there are different ways that you can if you've got a cost reduction mandate, in place, which a lot of companies do, you can start looking, an easy category to look at. It's kind of the sleeper category, I call it, is the subcategory of office supplies, which is ink and toner. Um,
Hmm.
you can start requiring duplex printing only, right? So you're reducing your paper and you're reducing just overall the number of prints that you're doing. You can force printers to default black, so you're not wasting color.
Or
Um,
toner efficient settings. That's
Absolutely.
what I've
The
seen.
toner
Yeah.
save modes,
Yeah.
which most printers have. And I think it's like a required feature actually now.
Hmm.
But there's like different things that customers can do to kind of like manage their whole print space in general. So like for example, looking at it from the hardware standpoint, am I getting hardware that's going to meet my needs? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Check that box. Is it going to cost me an arm and a leg to supply this thing? That's something that doesn't get looked at. That's the reactive part of what this category is, unfortunately. So if you can go, hey, yeah, we need some new machines, but I want to make sure that it has like super extended, ultra high yield cartridges available for it. And I want to make sure that if you've got if you're a company that's set up where each of the offices or something, an office manager has access to your Staples corporate account or your business Amazon business account, and so that they're doing the ordering on their own, make it a blackout catalog where they are forced to only choose from a certain number of cartridges. There's a customer I'm working with right now who has been using that kind of a setup for their procurement environment, but they didn't do a blackout. So what they had found after I talked to their retail ops manager was they were throwing away probably $500,000 worth of toner for machines that either had been ordered incorrectly and then an RMA was never requested and it was never returned and credited, or they'd overbought because FOMO is a real thing. They overbought and then IT did a hardware refresh and changed the machine out. And so now they're using a different cartridge. And so then they were stuck with supplies for machines they didn't even have anymore. And this had been going on for years, they had said. Like every quarter they'd go in and do a clean out, clean things up in their stores. And then they were just literally just lighting money on fire. I'm like, okay,
Wow.
well, I'm sure your, finance department would have loved to have that 500 grand back in their pocket to spend on something else.
Bonuses, right?
Right.
It's on
Bonuses,
salary.
exactly. Or hey, we don't need to lay as many people off or any because we actually were being more mindful of what was being spent. So with that particular customer, we did a couple of things. We did a blackout, which reduced them buying low yield cartridges because most companies will say, "Oh, I've got this office has a budget of $1,000 in a month that they can spend," and when they start, whittling that budget down because they're buying stuff and they go, oh, I need a cartridge. They go, oh, I can only afford the low yield one right now. Well, it's cheaper. So I'll just buy that one because it's less expensive. Well, not really thinking that they're going to have to order that thing probably 4 times as often. And so the savings that they thought they were doing, on a per purchase basis totally negated, any actual realized savings that they were doing. They're actually spending like 3 or 4 times more.
Wow.
Um, so by doing the blackout thing, it eliminated them ordering accidentally, or ordering too much, ordering the wrong thing. So we forced them into, no, you're only using this ultra high yield cartridge because it just cuts your page costs
Yeah. Yeah.
down tremendously, right? Then the other thing we did was for their bigger devices, they had their bigger multi-functions, is we put them on an auto toner program. So they actually eliminated totally them even ordering for their
For on the
highest
auto
volume printer.
replenishment.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that they came just in time. So, our system connected to theirs, and all we were reading was the toner level. So as soon as it said toner low, boom, a cartridge went out. They had about 10 days before they were actually going to go empty. So that was plenty of time for a cartridge to get delivered, sent out and delivered to them. And they had it just when they needed it. And they never had to keep stock of anything because there was always going to be one on the way
That's awesome.
when they needed it. So they kind of did a twofold thing. It reduced, the amount that the stores were actually, their physical job of going in and ordering supplies, but then also, eliminated wrong ordering, over ordering, all that kind of stuff. So they ended up saving probably, I think the first year it was like 1.2. I mean, just because they stopped throwing things away, and it's like if you order it wrong, that's fine. Go to Staples, go to Amazon. Hey, I don't need this anymore, or I ordered this wrong. I need to return it. But a
That
lot of people
sourcing
will
lead must have
just,
gotten a promotion out of this. I mean,
yeah,
nice.
it was a big deal because it was just they hadn't looked at it, so they didn't know. So there's sometimes low visibility in this category, especially if your company is set up where the actual people, the staff are doing the ordering, and procurement isn't actually involved in that kind of purchase. But it's ripe for improving efficiencies and stuff like that. Not just in how the cartridges are being ordered in general, but also what cartridges. Like, can we just be more cost effective in the supplies we're using? But it kind of starts with the hardware. So if you're in a point where like, hey, we plan a hardware refresh every 5 years, every 2.5 years, or whatever. Start talking with procurement and talk to the company that you're getting your supplies from. Like, hey, what's a good model for me that's going to be long term? The TCO is going to be better, you know. Um, it's
Wow.
a great way. It's a question that you can partner. And it doesn't mean that you have to go with that company for the supplies itself, but just
Mm.
ask those questions because a lot of times companies will go with like a dealer or they'll go through the OEM. What do they care about? They care about, oh, I'm going to sell this thing because I
the
just need to
highest
drop so
price.
many units.
Yeah,
Or, oh, I'm going to get the supplies for this thing. I don't care if it's cost effective for them. I know I'm going to make a ton of
good
money on it.
commission. Yeah.
Yeah.
One question we got here from Sam Chinnis, instructor on the faculty at UNC Greensboro, asked about the era of AI, blockchain kinds of, and Ethereum, those types of technologies, and how perhaps how they've kind of introduced themselves into this world. I would think because of blockchain allowing for then seeing a lot more. But I'm just curious, like
Yeah,
from your
you
perspective.
froze there for a second, but
Sorry,
I think
it
you
was
were
about
talking
block.
about like blockchain and transparency, and has this helped
Yeah,
our
yeah.
industry a little bit? I would say yes and no. I mean, do I ever have a customer, even at the Fortune 500 level, ask me like those minutia kind of questions? I would say maybe 10%. It hasn't been a category, even though it is wrought with fraud and IP stealing, theft, and all that kind of stuff. Um, Ink and toner kind of is the category that doesn't get looked at for that kind of stuff. Even though the data is there, if you want to ask your suppliers, you can get that data from them. But I would say it's probably not. I mean, I've got a customer right now who hasn't really even been tracking their spend. Like they go out to RFP every 5 years and they go, here's what we want pricing on. And I'm like, okay, well, one of the questions I'm like, well, what's the usage? And they're like, oh, we don't know. And so they only know that they have these machines, but they have no idea how much they're actually buying of those
They're
things. I'm
not
like,
part of the
so
cool kids. That's just
yeah,
what I'm saying.
yeah. So I think because office supplies in general is kind of thought of as like the boring category. It's reaction. Oh, I need paper. I need pens. I need, you know, paper clips, whatever. It's people just go and source it when they need it, but they're not necessarily looking at where did it come from, who's producing it, are there sustainable alternatives to it that are great for the environment? Do we have mandates like that where we're cost reduction, or we're looking at more sustainability or supplier diversity, any of those kinds of things? I would say a lot of companies don't look at that kind of stuff when it comes to like blockchain, and it just isn't, maybe the other IT hardware they do, or other
Mm.
IT categories, but not necessarily this one in particular, unfortunately.
Wow. Well, good question, Sam. As we now know, it's an opportunity. It just depends on how receptive folks are to be forward thinking. I mean, they probably could with blockchain and Ethereum. You could probably look at being able to do more due diligence. It could make the due diligence process a little bit quicker if you've got the right crawling data crawling technology to be able to find that information and not give you hallucinations, right?
Yeah, I think like EcoVadis or EcoVadis. I know
Hmm.
obviously they're really big in the ESG space, so they drill down a lot when it comes to supplier and that kind of stuff. I think Supplier IO has done some things as well, in that respect, kind of more on the supplier diversity side too. So you might get that kind of data if you partner with one of those kinds of companies. But if you want to know, just ask. It's ask your supplier. Are they dwindling down all of that information to the minutia so that they can provide you with stuff? Like if I have a customer who really cares about the environment, we've got an environmental calculator, and we could tell them, here's what you saved this year by switching from OEM to this product, or in general by just engaging in a cartridge recycling program.
Hmm.
Here's how many pounds of plastics and metals and all those things that you saved from our landfills. Or, oh, let's get involved with another aspect of like replanting trees. There's a program called Print Relief, and companies can sign up for that. And so every 3 reams of paper, a tree gets planted somewhere. Those kinds
Hmm.
of things. So if you want to know those kinds of pieces of info, it's like just ask. Like I'd be surprised how many times customers actually don't ask, even though the information is there. It's just not something it's not a metric they're watching.
Well, then let's get back to you and with quality imaging. So it sounds like some of the offerings you would be able to provide are just like what we've taught our conversation today. Just the general view of the industry. There's also then opportunities to help with perhaps help create RFIs to identify who would be even worthwhile to look at in the space.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Additionally, looking at the sustainability programs, especially if if there are companies that are held to like the EU Green Deal. How do you deal with that, right? And how do you
right.
then work on compliance, especially if you meet their minimum criteria where you have to disclose that in your reporting, or Australia or Hong Kong or the UK, other big proponents in the sustainability space. What else? What like how else could we partner with your company?
Um, Really it's asking the question like here's what we're doing, here's kind of here's where we've been, here's where we are, and here's where we want to go. And I love being able to have those conversations with like not just procurement, but let me talk to finance, let me talk to IT, and kind of get those stakeholders in the same room because everyone's going to have different questions based on what their function is, right? Um, and so being able to come in and go, oh, we're not just doing a reactionary RFP because we've got these supplies we need and we're going to put out, a bid for something. It's, well, why are you using this? Like, do you know that there's a high yield cartridge available? So a lot of times when I participate in RFPs, I'm suggesting alternatives that they might not have
Mhm.
even thought of, and I'm just giving the information. Like, hey, yeah, you're using this one, but this one's actually more cost effective. Or these two are actually more cost effective. Here's how it breaks down cost per page. um the one customer that I was talking about that asked me about hardware recommendations, and we're looking at Brother. They were looking at two things like HP and Lexmark discontinue their stuff all the time, so it's forcing us to have to go to rebid to get new supplies out of the catalog. But also the supplies are really expensive. Like HP and Lexmark are probably one of the two most expensive total cost of ownership manufacturers of printers because of the supplies. So they're looking at cost savings too. So by switching them over to a Brother, it was just on the per cartridge basis, it was going to save them over $100 per cartridge because they're paying around 200 for this high yield Lexmark one right now. I'm like, you can actually get a Brother cartridge that has a higher page yield than the Lexmark that you're using, and it's going to be half as much. And so they're like, right off the bat, the cost savings is like immediate just by even looking at different manufacturers. So
Mhm.
if your company has been kind of like standardized with a certain brand for a long time, look at other manufacturers. There might be something that totally fits your needs that you didn't think that might not have thought of. One thing that I love about Brothers is they're so user friendly. Like if you've got to replace a part here or there, it's all they build their machines so that they're end user replaceable components.
Mhm.
Whereas
Mhm.
with HP and Lexmark, depending on the piece of equipment, you sometimes need a technician to do it because they're
So
so
more
complicated.
vertically integrated. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, which higher costs, and a
It
lot of
makes it
companies don't have.
sticky. It makes that
Yeah,
relationship sticky. Yeah.
it does, and so it makes it hard to pull away because of that too. So look at units that are just more end user friendly to where
Mhm.
you kind of give power back a little bit to the actual users of those pieces of equipment.
Right.
And it
Okay.
makes it easier for them. So your costs go down, time spent in triaging, heat
Mhm.
tickets for printer problems go down. So your IT people aren't focused on, oh, the printer won't work or the printer's jamming, all these things, right? Like let's get a piece of equipment that's going to reduce the number of, service tickets we get for stupid things. And Brother is like a great manufacturer for that. It just, I love them. Yeah,
I can tell. I
I
can
would
tell.
sell Brother all day long just because I think
I
they're
can
they're
tell.
awesome piece of equipment. But
Well, so as we're wrapping up, there's a few takeaways I had in here is that the semiconductor industry does play a part in your world. Making sure to look at the infrastructure, the hardware, looking at the hardware plus the supplies, not just the supplies themselves. Um, Making sure that you become more mindful and give it the attention it deserves, and not just look at it as like papers, pencils and pens and paper clips. That there's money to be saved through thoughtfully and mindfully attacking the category.
yep.
And Heather Fotch is really awesome. Those are my takeaways.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like whatever the category is, right? Like what's responsible and sustainable sourcing?
Mm-hmm.
It's environmental stewardship, that's the feel good, warm and fuzzy thing. Social responsibility, making sure you're not buying from companies that are doing terrible things to people. You're supporting local communities too. That's huge, obviously. Ethical governance, all
Hmm.
of those things, economic vibe, all of those things playing into it. Life cycle perspective, all that kind of stuff are key things in this industry. But like, what is responsible sourcing? It's like minimizing negative environmental, social, and ethical impacts on our society. It's
Yeah.
the simple, and ink and toner kind of falls into that. It's not the category you think about realistically in those things, but it's a way where this category definitely is, like I said, the sleeper category where there's wins there to just reduce cost. That's
Hmm.
that's super easy. That's like that's the low hanging fruit is the cost reduction in that category. But can we improve, what supplies or what hardware we're purchasing that drives the cost of using that unit?
And
It's the cost
protects
of the
our own
supply.
health as well as the
Protects your
environment.
health. Exactly. You're not contributing to,
Cancer.
atrocities happening to other people too, like all of
Yeah.
those things. So, unfortunately, it's the life we live right now where you've got
Hmm.
to look at those kinds of things. So, if you have an opportunity to look at, some of those categories that don't necessarily, draw attention,
Hmm.
you there's opportunities there for, not just saving money, but also improving how you purchase and what you
Well,
purchase and
thank you
where
so
you
much,
purchase.
Heather. I wanted to be conscious of the time, but thank you so much.
Yep.
And Kathy was kind enough to share your LinkedIn profile there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
How else can we contact you or folks contact you for more information?
Yeah, yeah. So I had a slide deck and we ended up just riffing, which ended up being perfect. So you go to my LinkedIn page and on there I've got a link for my Calendly.
Hmm.
And you could book an appointment with me through there. Or just email me. It's heather.fotch@qualityimagingsolutions.com. My email is also on my LinkedIn. So you can reach out,
Awesome.
via LinkedIn DM or via email or book through my Calendly.
Great. Well, thanks for being such an advocate of ISM, and thanks everybody for your time today with ISM Carolinas, Virginia. And I
Yeah.
hope everyone has a great weekend, and please stay safe with all the winter weather coming your way, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. You too. Then thank you again for the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, hope to see you guys at a later time. Thanks again. Bye bye.